emulate the fine English gentleman, his sexism and ethnocentrism included, it was again Das. Hence, it is no surprise that while translating Senapati's work, Das refracts the tale through the prism of English literary tradition, whereby attempting to re-christen the Odia novel by embellishing it with references from English literature. As Das himself suggests, what at any rate it illustrates is my full faith that English literature can enrich an Indian vernacular tale by teaching him who retells it in English the art of re-christening its thoughts and imagery and giving it an Indo-Anglican domicile in the Commonwealth of letters. The impact is, when we read this text, the conversational tone and the regional flavor of the original text is almost missing. An image of Senapati as a target language reader we get is not very different from that an English author. The following passage, where the maid servant Marua is called for questioning the court, will clarify my point. Marua goes, my liberator, the Babaji had been waiting for me under a wood apple tree in the backyard of my father's house. We walked away through the darkness to test the bliss of the soul. I heard him whisper with his devotional lips in my ear on the dark night that the path to Vrindavan was indeed a dark and difficult path. On our way to the holy Vrindavan, my spiritual benefactor and I sojourned for a month or so in a splendid Irani hotel called First Guys and Hot Styles, which stood in those days in Telenga Bazaar in the city of Qatar. The style is flamboyant, it creates a different image of Morua than what the original text would have wanted to create. However, the next translation, 6 Acres and a Third, which was translated in 2005, not only made amends to that by taking the discourse closer to the sly, indirect and satiric narrative style of Senapati's original, but in addition it created a very different image of Senapati as a writer. By authentically capturing the colloquial, indirect and self-parodic narrative style of Senapati, this translation projected Senapati as a postmodernist and Bakhtinian writer. An example well clarified. In chapter 12 of 6 Acres and a Third, the translators have translated Senapati as, "O you English educated Babus, do not be too critical of our local historian, Ekadasya Chandra. If you are, half of what Masmillan and Todd have written will not survive the light of the day." So look at the conversational tone they have adopted. Here the intention of the translators is clearly to bring out the way in which Senapati has questioned the so-called official and genuine version of history, thereby projecting the work as a text which, like a novel in the Bakhtinian sense, has an unofficial existence outside high literature. Another example is in the context of the lawyer acquiring the Jamindari, the villagers are having a conversation. They are saying, "Hey there, horse, watch out, or someone else will steal." "What matter?" replies the horse. "Wherever I'll go, I'll get same fodder and water." The third translation, which came out in the year 2021, tries to move forward in the direction of foreignization and tries to make the cultural context of the source language more prominent and visible. But at the same time, it has not shied away from the awareness of the literary discourse, mostly derived, taken from the West of the present times. For instance, let's have a look at the paragraph from Mohapatra in his review of the latest translation. The present English translation, the sixth one and the latest, is a robust performance for sure, unafraid to approach the original in a spirit of experimentation. Note, for instance, its use of deconstruction to cast into bold relief Senapati's actual deconstructive method of narration. In this instance, his deconstructive treatment of existing literary convention of portraying female characters in a famous chapter on Champa. It would seem that the translation's own approach to the novel's realism and modernity is far from a tame affair. Here the translators bring their complex and theoretical understanding of the world in order to engage with Senapati's text. But whilst doing so, they managed to show a greater loyalty to the original text and attempted to present all the allusions to the literary tradition of India from which Senapati has drawn so frequently, especially in the translations of poetic parts, which is the most challenging to translate. Here's an example. Bosom half bare, sly smile on her lips, clothes in disarray, arms akimbo, flying on her steed. So there, while customizing it for the West, the translators are also trying to get you a flavor of the native tradition that Senapati wrote in. So in conclusion, the evolution of translation studies in the past century has been shaped by many factors, such as technological advancement, cultural and social changes, interdisciplinary approaches and all. With the development of new translational strategies, the approach of the translators to the text changes, and with it, the text is transformed into a new version of itself. By adding new dimension to the text, each new translation revises the image of the writer. The multiple translations of Senapati's text have played a big role in constructing Senapati as a writer, the way we perceive him today, and bringing him increased global visibility in a very similar fashion that his criticism has done to him. Hence, it can safely be said that each translation of a text is a new interpretation which redefines the text while presenting it to the readers. Thank you.
Mr. Narayan. Now I welcome Ms. Sanskruti Pujari and present her paper. 15 minutes.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. My name is Sanskruti Pujari and the title of my paper would be Translating Letters, Translating Women, an Insight into Tagore's Experiments with the Epistolary Genre. Now, the influence of the 18th century British epistolary tradition on the travel narratives of India, especially that of Deen Muhammad travels, not only in English but also in the Bhasha traditions, cannot be ignored. There is a predominant use of letters as the only form of distant communication, here to be understood as a form of communication between the text and the readers, in major fictional works of colonial India. Not only are there texts written entirely in the epistolary format, but also the ones that use letters and letter writing as an integral part of the text. Especially in the works of Tagore, the use of letters is pronounced and beautifully noticeable. Much work has been done on the letters written by Tagore, but very little work has been done towards exploring the significance of the evident usage of letters as a device in the majority of his works. Almost every well-known work of Tagore has at least one letter in them, and that letter plays a huge role not only in the development of the plot, but also holds the essence of several intricate nuances of the story as a whole. The wife's letter is an example of the epistolary format of writing. But there are several other stories, novellas, plays, even poems written by Tagore that have the usage of letters or the epistolary format in them. In most of his works, the letter holds such importance that it comes across as a living, breathing character in the work. Now I would move to my key arguments. The selected letters celebrate female subjectivity through language. It is not how a man would write a letter, but letters constructed in écriture feminine, as Sisu would call it. When a woman writes a letter, the Chalit Bhasha or the colloquial form of Bangla is used instead of a more formal language. This can be seen in the letters of Nonibala, a young widow from the novella Chaturanga or Broken Ties, Mrinal from Stree Potra or the wife's letter, and Anila from Poila number or house number 1. The short story The Wife's Letter or Street Potro begins with a very common Bangla phrase of addressing someone in a letter, Shri Charana Kamaleshu. It means, my submission at your lotus feet. It ends with the phrase, bereft of the shelter of your family's feet. It is interesting to note that the name of the protagonist, the voice behind the letter, is Mrinal. Mrinal is a word of Sanskrit origin, which means lotus stalk. The beginning of the letter signifies how Mrinal is stemming to the house of her in-laws in a very subservient manner. The end, however, suggests a sense of independence and emancipation. She is now ready to bloom on her own and does not need the binding shelter and nourishment of her husband's patriarchal household. It is to be noted that the protagonist's name is revealed at the end of the story through her signature. Before that, her identity is always linked to a familial relationship. She is the Meja Bahu or the second daughter-in-law of the house. She is the Didi or elder sister to Bindu. And most importantly, she is the Stree or the wife of the husband to whom the letter is addressed to. It is only at the end of the letter that she is established as an individual, as Mrinal. She is reborn as an individual, emancipated from the clutches of patriarchal control. Now it is very interesting to note that the idea of a woman transgressing from the set norms of those times was challenged by none other than Bipin Chandra Pal when he rewrote Street Patra as Mrinaler Kotha, and in which he made the character sign the letter at the end, just like the salutation, seeking the protection of her family and not bereft of it like Tagore had written. The Wife's Letter is not the only fictional work by Tagore to have a dig at this very popular salutation though. The Lotus Feet salutation finds a rather humorous and satirical treatment in the popular novella Chaturanga. It is one of the least translated yet most critically acclaimed novellas of Rabindranath Tagore, the English translation being Broken Ties. The story is comprised of 4 chapters. We'll focus on the first chapter because the epistolary genre shines the most in it. Now, Noni Bala, the young widow character, was rescued by a character called Satish from a violent household and entrusted to the protection of his uncle Jagmohan. The chapter begins in its essence with an exchange of letters and ends with a letter that can have no further correspondence. The exchange of letters between Narayan to Jagmohan highlights the latter's outlook towards things. It is to be noted that the diction specific to letter writing is used as a tool to attack all principles that Jagmohan finds illogical and outdated. Jagmohan is highly critical about Narayan's salutary address, "to the gracious feet of." In his reply, he assertively states that the epithet is a useless one, as it disassociates the feet from the human body. He further explains that feet lack the power of comprehensibility, and it is illogical to address a letter to someone's feet. He is correctional and highly satirical of the plural inflection of the word foot as feet. This particular correspondence gives us a deep insight into the character of Jagmohan. He is established as an assertive man who is sure of his ideologies and does not indulge in ideals that do not seem acceptable to him. His life finds a sense of completeness with the arrival of the character of Noni Bala in his life. He addresses her as mother. He hopes that she could escape from the restraining clutches of the society and find her freedom in a more progressive emancipation guided by him. As a widow, she is viewed as a sinner in the eyes of the society, but as a daughter in the eyes of Jagmohan. Noni Bala, on the other hand, has huge reverence for him and equals him to God. So much so that she cannot express her inability to give in to his wishes of giving her a new life by getting her remarried. She chose death as she considered it as the only escape from a world that was not ready to allow her a chance at happiness. The way Noni Bala addresses Jagmohan in her suicide letter shows his utter failure in making her understand the way he viewed the world. Her salutation features the epithet "gracious feet," a phrase that Jagmohan had rejected in the beginning of the novella. It was right from the address that he understood that he can never change the entire socialization process of the society in which he was living, no matter how regressive and suffocating it was. She signed off the letter as Noni Bala the sinner, an identity that was imposed upon her by the society and that she had accepted as her unchanging fate. Her tone in the letter is very timid, apologetic, and drenched in submissiveness. It is to be noted how the same phrase finds different meaning in the different works of the same author. This clearly shows that Tagore not only experimented with the epistolary genre, but also tried to revive it using its own unique forms. The language in each letter changes with the voice of the character that writes it, from formal to informal. The diction is mostly simple and vernacular, notwithstanding the character that writes it. But when the tone of the letter is a bit serious, then it is reflected in its diction too. The 1917 short story, Poila Number, is a story of an unnamed male narrator, and his wife, Anila. The narrator is a man who is addicted to books and spends most of his time amidst his admirers, followers, discussing everything under the sun, from mathematics, philosophy, literature. When a new neighbor named Shiktanshu moves into the house next door, the narrator finds that his followers spend more time with Shiktanshu than with him. His concerns about his intellectual exercises being interfered with and the disturbance in his life caused by the arrival of this neighbor take up all of his time. He is so occupied in his own world that he never pays any heed to his wife Anila. He is even unaware of the death of his brother-in-law due to his lack of communication with his wife. The role that Anila plays in his life is that of a full-time cook who acts as a listener to his philosophical musings when he cannot find anyone else. She is confined to the Antapura or the inner quarters of the house and spends her day fulfilling the duties of a wife. Anila's letter is another example of a letter written by a wife neglected by her husband. She is confined to the Antapura of the house just like Mrinal. While Mrinal offers a comprehensive and detailed letter mentioning the exact reasons why she left the house, Anila refrains from doing so. The extremely short length of a letter proves that she owes no explanation to her husband anymore. Her husband never understood her during the tenure of their marriage, and she did not expect him to understand ever. Her tone in the letter is very assertive and diminishes any hope for reconciliation. She even makes it clear to Shiktanshu that she is in no requirement of his adoration. Both the letters have the exact same content, the sameness maintained to the very last punctuation. The letters are even sent to the two men on the same date. Most importantly, the letters lack salutations. The changes that Tagore makes to the form and language of his letters have a great impact on the meaning that is created through them. There is a multiplicity of thoughts and interpretations. There is an existence of tropes inspired by well-known epistolary texts, but these tropes are reinvented for an essentially Indian readership. The dates in most of these letters are written according to the Hindu calendar. The use of vernacular language draws the reader towards the text in a more intimate and conversational manner. For the letters written by women, Tagore uses colloquial form of Bangla as an attempt to create an écriture feminine for his women characters. To conclude my paper, the politics behind publication of correspondence was to provide the readers a peek into conversation meant for two individuals. The voice of the writer of the letter is present in a work of short fiction, but that of the reader is lost somewhere. This is relevant in the wife's letter and also to some extent in Chaturanga. The helplessness and lack of power of the receiver of the letters is almost palpable, and almost always the receiver is a man. The idea of public versus private in the Indian context, especially in the context of a woman, is very crucial to understand. The binary of the home and the world, or the Antapura and the Samsara, dictates the way the letters turn out to be and the possibility, if any, of their exchange. This is demonstrated by the escape of the characters of Mrinal and of Anila from the inner quarters of the house and their eventual emancipation. The popularity of the epistolary genre in most of the fictional works taken up by the women of those times reveal the power that letter writing gave to them. Tagore gives a similar power and scope for liberation and transformation to the women characters in his fiction through the act of writing letters. The comparison of these letters with the other popular epistolary works written by women of those times, such as the works of, say, Naughty Vinodini, offer a rounded socio-historical understanding of the trend of epistolary genre in the writings of women of early 20th century colonial Bengal. A society rooted in its traditional milieu, yet headed towards a sense of colonial modernity, the flux amidst which women were finding a new voice. Tagore's letters are a vivid representation of colonial India and all its issues, starting from the regressive patriarchal hegemony to the differences of caste and religion. They act as detailed accounts of growing nationalism in the country, a succinct account of history, treatise on spirituality, and means of liberation and emancipation for women. The recurrence of thematic patterns and the coherence of diction provide evidence of a new form of epistolary technique used specifically by Tagore. The thematic aspects of the idea of nation, societal constructs, colonial modernity, women's emancipation, domestic quibbles, conjugal exchanges, political discourses, travel description, etc., occur both in his non-fictional letters and his fictional ones. In the end, I would just like to say that translating Tagore's letters indeed helps the translator in translating women in a way that only Rabi Thakur would have wanted us to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanskruti, for your wonderful presentation. Now the session is open for discussion. From the audience, I'd like to invite some questions or some remarks or suggestions.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Yes, sir, please. You can come here. Yes, sir.
So, with the permission of the chair, I would like to have a reflection on the papers presented by Dr. Tyagaraja and Narayan. So, we have been talking about translation. And especially in the Indian context, when we talk about translation, we mean by that translating works from vernacular language to English. But talking about the other way around, may I have your views? I am going to cite the examples of two works of art. First is Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was published in 1852. And when this novel was published, that had a very catastrophic impact on American society. It was so powerful that it gave rise to American Civil War after 10 years. And equally pertinent is when Barack Obama became the first Afro-American president, one journalist asked him on the first day of his White House, "What is the secret of your coming to White House?" He replied, "Because of this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Had I not come through this book, probably you would not have found me here." This is the first example. So my point is, there is a social mission associated with every novel. Supposing we translate that work into Oriya, Uncle Tom's Cabin into Oriya, is it going to have any impact on our society, Indian society, or say Odishan society? Number one. Secondly, I am reminded of Mikhail Gorbachev's two terms, glasnost and perestroika. These two words had also catastrophic impact on Russian economy, and it led to the disintegration of the society, and it also affected globalization to a great extent. So my point is, writing has a mission. We should write not for the sake of writing, but it has to reach out the larger audience, and it should have an impact on the society. So in the context, our context, supposing we translate these two works of art, say the first work of art, as I mentioned, Uncle Tom's Cabin into Oriya, or say Hindi, is it going to have any impact on our society? So my point is, do we believe in proliferation of knowledge or proliferation of books through this enterprise? Thank you.
Thank you for your reflections. My submission would be that if a work of art, with whichever way of translation, Odia to English, English to Odia, or Hindi to Odia, doesn't make a difference, as you said, it should make an impact. Right. So in my paper also I talked about Boogie Wathiengo's take on his concept of global ethics. He's talking about a linguistic feudalism that English has been having for long. he's trying to break this. He says that it's no more about literature, English literature. It's about literatures in English for a global readership. But yes, if we read Gabriel Garcia Marquez today in English, it is not always original English. There's plenty of books that we originally do not know where they're from originally. The job of book, the job of, as you said, job of a novel, a job of literature is to address, it's a mission itself. Literature is on a mission. I welcome any kind of translation, be it from Odia to Hindi, Hindi to Odia, English to, this cross should always be welcome. There is no denial of the fact. Literature should be literature, it should be literature in English because of a global readership, that's it. And if there are wonderful pieces in other languages, like Sharma Natugutta has crossed that boundary of English also, it's available in Spanish now. So because it's making an impact in the global readership. I think it's a welcome note, whichever language it is, it should have, you said it will have a catastrophe. I won't call catastrophe, yes, it will have an impact on our intellect,